Hi, everyone. Chris Fields joins us today. He's a former member of the Oklahoma City Fire Department. He joined the fire department in July of 1985 and was promoted through the ranks all the way to major and retired in March of 2017. He served the citizens of Oklahoma for 31 years and 7 months. He shares his journey in the field and dealing with post-traumatic stress disorder, especially after the Oklahoma City bombing, and how that just became a catalyst in his life for much, much change. I'll let Chris tell that story as we tune into this show today. And thank you, listeners, for joining us on the First Responder Mental Health Network on Mental Health News Radio.
I'm not the house of cards that falls down easily. I'm strong enough to handle what you throw at me.
Welcome to Mental Health News Radio. I'm your host, Kristin Sunanta Walker. Just what are we going to discuss? The intimacy that is mental health. Let's continue to make it as comfortable as discussing brain health or heart health. This show has been on the air for several years, and we have amazing co-hosts. And then we created a network of podcasters on mentalhealthnewsradionetwork.com, a place where every possible facet of mental well-being can be talked about openly. My show, after several hundred interviews, the format is this: intimate, deep, funny, touching, sometimes uncomfortable, but always vulnerable conversations with interesting people. The goal is to have you, our listening family, many of you who have become my good friends, feel as though you are listening in on private conversations. Thank you for tuning in and becoming part of this amazing journey with me, and now with our network of podcasters. Just knowing this podcast might be helping any of you realize you are not alone on this journey called being a human being makes doing this podcast worth every second.
After all we promised, we'd be cordial.
Chris, I'm so glad that you are joining us on our First Responder Mental Health Network on Mental Health News Radio.
Well, thank you. Thank you for having me, and welcome to all your listeners also.
Absolutely. Barry Toone joins me as my co-host. Hi, Barry.
How are you, Kristin? Good to be on again.
I'm good. Now, you brought Chris to our door, so please fire away with questions.
Well, I think what I'd like to do, just a lot of individuals, people who are listening are going to recognize the name. And I once we get into this, Chris's story, I know that there are going to be people who immediately have that aha moment when we start talking about a photograph. But what I'd like to do, Chris, if it's okay with you, is why don't you give us a little bit of background on why I wanted you on this show, and tell us a little bit about your story, specifically that iconic moment when a photograph was taken of you on a particular day.
Okay, yeah, that sounds easy enough. My name's Chris Fields. I was a 31-year member of the Oklahoma City Fire Department. March 1st, I've been retired 3 years. The reason and the how abouts that me and Barry came together was through some mutual contacts dealing with mental health and addiction and situations like that. And for me, my downward, I guess I would say, spiral started after April 19th, 1995, after the Oklahoma City bombing. And a photo was taken of me and Baylee Almon. And just some of the things I dealt with immediately afterwards that I, in my firefighter macho way, learned to suppress and just carry on. That what I found out several years later, that, and in my mind when I was going through some of these struggles, I was thinking, if I can just get this worked out, it's the bombing, it's all this photo. What I come to find out once I got into counseling and all that it was a lot of cumulative trauma that had been unprocessed and all that. And so I always like to tell people that photo and that bombing, in a roundabout way, probably saved my life. It was a catalyst, to kickstart some processing that I need to get done.
Tell us a little bit more about that photo, because it did play a major role in your life and getting you to the point where you are now. Describe that for the listeners, that for the few that might not be familiar with what took place that day.
Okay. Surely it was. Of course, it was April 19th. The bomb was detonated at 9:02, and probably about 45 minutes, maybe an hour into the incident, we had completed one assignment from the incident command. We were going to another one, and a gentleman, I still say to this day, he just like appeared. I didn't see him come out of the building, come around the corner. He was just in front of me, and he said he had a critical infant, and he handed me, and I said, "Here, I'll take her." I don't know why I didn't just direct him to say, "Here's an ambulance over here," or anything. My mom always, Christopher Lee, there was a reason it was you. That's what she always says and what she always called me. But, he handed me Baylee, and immediately I checked her for any signs of life. I had to clear some insulation or like concrete dust out of her throat. She had an open skull fracture. I couldn't find any signs of life. So I looked across the street and there was an ambulance, and there were some paramedics working on people. So I walked over there, and I told him I had a critical infant. And he told me at that time the ambulance was full. They had 3 people in the ambulance, one on the floor, one on the bench, one on the stretcher. And then there was people on the ground outside the ambulance on backboards. And he said, "Hold on a second. I'm going to get a blanket. We're not going to put that baby on the ground." And that is, and just to back up a little bit, and we'll go into that, I guess. I didn't know the photo was taken until 11 o'clock that night. I didn't see it actually until the next day. So when I look back at the photo and see what I was doing, that's how I know exactly what I was thinking and where I was at, because I was waiting for him to get the blanket, and I was just looking down at Baylee thinking, she turned a year old the day before. So I knew she was close to that age. I had a son at home that was a little over a year old also. And so, but in my mind, I was just looking down at her thinking, wow, somebody's world is getting ready to be turned upside down. And that was just running through my head. Of course, only an hour, 45 minutes, hour in the incident, not realizing that, there was going to be 168 total deaths that day, that many lives would be changed, along with all the over 600 injuries and everything. But at that specific moment, I just remember when I see the photo that's what was running through my mind, that, somebody's world is getting ready to be turned upside down today.
How long from that moment to you putting your, the first foot into a counseling office?
Kind of embarrassed. Probably about 2000, probably about 6 or 7 years.
Okay. Now it's good to put context to it, because this is part of why we're doing what we're doing with these shows.
Right.
Is to say, look, there's no shame in going, and there's no shame in not going either. But everybody, it's good to say 6 or 7 years from a moment like that to show people that are not first responders, this is how difficult it is for someone in this profession to go and get that kind of help.
Exactly. Very well put. Thank you.
I think what strikes me, what's always just grabbed me about this image, and then about your story, Chris, is, and I would certainly encourage listeners that are not familiar with that image to please look it up. It's so easy to find. If you just look up Chris Fields and Oklahoma City bombing, the date, April 19th, 1995, and then it's going to pop right up. But it is the quintessential image of a first responder projecting strength and boy, I even want to say love and everything that we think about when we think about a first responder who is acting in the moment and picking the rest of us up. It captures everything about that group. Probably better than any image I've ever seen. There are 1 or 2 on 9/11 that get close. But I just don't know. I get choked up every time I see that image. But then the story behind that image with you, Chris, is what's so fascinating to me. When you walk away from that and you think, well, Chris is the strong one, because you were that day. Nobody who doesn't know the story or understand what can happen to first responders when they deal with the trauma that they deal with would ever in their mind think, oh boy, here's what's going to be in store for him down the road.
Right.
And that's what's so powerful about this. And that's why I so very much wanted to have you on this show. So Kristin asked the right question. And that is, how long did it take for you to get into to see somebody? And my question, I guess, would be, tell us about that journey. Was it something that you knew you had to do earlier than that 5 or 6 years? How did it start unfolding for you?
First of all, your comments about the photo, very poignant. Thank you. And I've had several people give me that point of view. And one of the things, Erin, which is Baylee's mother, which I'm still in contact with today, we're still good friends. That was one of the first things she told me when I met her. The first time I met her was she could tell by looking that by the way I was holding Bailey, I was a father. And that gave her comfort to know that she was being held by somebody, a father that knows what it's like to have kids. So for you to relay that, what you said, it just goes right hand in hand with what Erin told me. So, the immediate stuff that it all started like that next morning. As far as some of I've learned to come, find out there's irrational guilt and then there's rational guilt, and both of them will eat you up and destroy you. And for me, that next morning when I saw the photo the first time and then saw it on the news, I didn't know Erin at the time. And my first thought was, oh my gosh, has that family even identified? Do they know? That was just what was going through my head was, does this family even know? And then I struggled, some of the irrational guilt that I really, really struggled with, that I did a good job of just hiding and moving on because, I was hired in 1985. And back then, and even in 95, it wasn't very prevalent, but, I was just from that kind of that suck it up era, when I was hired. We could show a little bit of feelings. We didn't talk about them. We could show them though, because we could at least say we're human, but we didn't talk about them and process them. So a lot of the irrational guilt I was struggling with was that Erin, because of the photo, she wasn't allowed to grieve privately at all. Zero. She always had reporters and people outside her house following her everywhere. They had to have police presence at Baylee's funeral and running photographers out of trees with telephoto lens. I mean, that was her life. And I took that on as, being responsible for it because of the photo. Irrational guilt again, and finding out, talking to Erin, to find out I was the last one that she knows has kind of to hold Baylee. She wasn't allowed when I think her dad identified Baylee at the hospital once they found her. And then Erin, because of, I hate to say it, I don't know for sure, but something to do with because of the bombing and a crime scene and evidence, she wasn't allowed to touch or hold Baylee. And so I carried a lot of that guilt with me. And that connection with Erin, thinking, she thinks about me. She thinks about I'm the last one to hold her baby, and then the guilt of being singled out. Firefighting, all first responder stuff. It's a team-oriented, team effort, kind of thing.
Right.
And then to be singled out, which I always like to throw out there. But I had the most outstanding support from the men and women on the fire department. It was overwhelming, the support I got from them when I was, doing interviews and stuff. So it was uncomfortable, but it's still, but I noticed after that too, I had a lot of struggle with friends or some friends of ours would have babies or, something like that. And I would just say, oh, they're too little. I don't want to hold them. But I didn't want to, after going through what I went through, that was just a vice I was putting up. I just didn't want to hold a small child and look down at them again.
Yeah.
So, this kind of stuff, I just suppressed that stuff, and it went on for, and I may have lied to you. It may have been longer than 6 or 7 years now that I'm telling my story. I think I did go to a couple of the fire department offered some counselors, but none of these counselors were trained. They had never dealt with first responders. So I had heard that some of the counselors we told some of our stories to had to end up go for counseling because they weren't prepared for what they were going to hear. Some of the things we saw and had to do that day, you know. And so I went to one, and they were kind of like, I mean, they were just like, you know, I know I haven't been through it, but I think you have to disconnect. You can't take it personal. And they were giving all this stuff. I was going, nah, how do you not, you know, as first responders, we're trained to get there and make a bad situation better. And when we don't, we do take it personal. So I didn't like his or her advice not to take it personal. So I was pretty much done with counseling at that point. You know, but I knew that I probably needed some help because it would eat at me. But I found a way to, when I go to the station, just kind of, you know, push it aside, go on about my day and be the officer I needed to be. And, you know, home life, you know, be the husband and father I needed to be until the wife was gone to work, or, you know, and then I could kind of do my think about it, have my moments and lay around on the couch, you know, and not do nothing and just think about it. So I learned to do that. And that's what I did for 6 or 7 years. And until 2001 or 2002, we were putting a swimming pool in the backyard, and I was helping some guys bust out some concrete. It rained the night of the Oklahoma City bombing. When I was busting this concrete out back, it started raining. I didn't know what a trigger was then. I know now, but I caught the smell of wet concrete dust. Ooh. And when I caught that smell of wet concrete dust, in my mind, I mean, I didn't like freak out. But in my mind, I said, oh my, that smells just like being inside the building that day of the bombing. And I thought about that the rest of the day. I couldn't get that thought out of my head. And that's when things really started to, when I really, really started to notice that I wasn't hiding it as well. And that's when I noticed that my wife was noticing I wasn't hiding it as well, you know. And so that went on for several years. It was just and it got to the point to where I was comfortable with going to work and being happy-go-lucky Chris Fields, same old jokester guy I always am, to when I come home, now I wasn't worried about not showing my depression and my isolation and my little fits of rage and all that. I felt more comfortable doing it here. My wife didn't know what to do, or she didn't know how to handle it. So she let me pretty much do what I wanted to do as far as, you know, not talk about it, have my little fits of rage because she would ask me 10 times what I wanted for dinner. I couldn't decide. She couldn't decide. Well, that would set me off. And, you know, and the depression, a little more doubts of depression, just laying around the couch, isolation, pulling away from my sons a little bit more than, you know, like I always coached them, was always around, taking off to go to their games, and that kind of subsided. I still coach, but if I was at the station, I'm at the station, can't get off. I wasn't there. So this went on for 2 or 3 years, living like that. And me and my wife, communication was null and void because she didn't want to bring it up because she knew it set me off. And it got to the point to where we'd start arguing in front of the boys, and I had pretty good fits of anger, and it pretty much came to where she told me if I couldn't fix it, then I needed to get out. And in the state of mind I was in then, I said, perfect. That's it. You know, so I chose to move out, and that was probably one of the worst decisions of my life. Our communication got even worse. It led to start drinking a little more. I mean, I'm always kind of a social drinker, but it led to more just sitting around drinking. It led to extramarital affair. It learned to, you know, I was alienating and humiliating family and friends. The friends that wanted to talk to me and that cared about me, that told me I was doing wrong and I needed to get some help, those are the ones I pushed away because that's not what I wanted to hear. I wanted to hear, hey man, you know, it's your life, do what you need to do. And so those are the kind of friends, those are the friends I was hanging around, you know.
Hey listeners, a quick but important notice for all the shows that we'll be doing for our first responders. In 2018, the number of police officers, firefighters, EMTs, and veterans, anyone who's considered a first responder, who died of suicide was greater than the combined total killed in the line of duty. More attention is being paid, but help is often elusive. Even with more available resources, those who are first in line to help us actually asking for help for themselves, that can be the hardest thing for them to do. Mental Health News Radio Network is working with Stepstone Connect to give voice to our incredible first responders. Stepstone Connect is an organization born of the belief that accessibility and confidentiality will eliminate traditional barriers to treatment. Privacy and the peace of mind that comes with it, combined with easy, everywhere access, underlines Stepstone's mission and treatment philosophy. It's simple. With access to the internet and a device with a camera, you're a click away from leading mental health clinicians who specialize in the treatment of PTSD and other trauma-related injuries for first responders and their families. If you or someone you care about is struggling, please don't let another day pass before discovering what Stepstone can do. Stronger connections, everywhere access, stepstoneconnect.com. You can find out more by going to their website, stepstoneconnect.com, or call 800-495-3761. Now back to the show.
Was there anybody coming to you and saying, hey, you really need to get into counseling? Or, and I'm not saying anyone should have, because this is a different time, but I'm just curious, was there anybody that would crop up and say, hey, you know, you really do need to go talk about this?
Yes, ma'am. I had those friends that I pushed away. That's why I pushed them away.
Right. Right.
Because at the time, like I said, I'm still Chris Fields at the Oklahoma City Fire Department. I'm nobody, you know, I've got these people snowed to where I'm feeling great. And then once they do find out I'm out of the house, I still carry on that, you know, that outside complex. Like that's how I want it to be. I'm doing my life is exactly where I want it to be. But on the inside, you know, it's just killing me. But yes, my wife never, ever, ever, I could say ever, forever, ever gave up on me. Our fire department chaplain, they offered several times, and I just pushed them away because, to sum it up, really, I basically chose my pride and ego and my legacy with the fire department and what those people thought about me more than I did with my own family. And
right.
You know, and then I was able to, through a family doctor friend, I called him, and, you know, I was having these panic attacks and these bouts of depression and all this kind of stuff. Well, so I was able to call pretty much anytime I needed to and get, you know, get over Xanax. And
right.
Yeah, and
that'll mask a world of hurt, won't it, for a while? Anyway.
It will. And then when you read some of the possible effects of it, it's like suicidal ideation, bad decisions. Like I need any help with bad decisions, you know. I think it actually says poor judgment.
Alcohol, and you're like, but it's better with alcohol. Yeah.
Yeah, it actually says poor judgment on the bottle, and I'm going like, I need any more help with poor judgment, you know. And so, yeah. So this and like I said, this went on for me and my wife were separated 15 months, and I always told everybody we were just separated a year. And then she went on one of my speaking deals with me, and she corrected me. So, so it was, yeah, she's not allowed to go anymore. No, I'm just kidding. But it was, we were separated 15, almost 16 months. And, you know, without, like say, I can sum up the gory details by saying there wasn't one person in my life that wasn't reaching out to help me that I didn't humiliate or alienate myself from. That's just to put it simple without going through each stupid act. That's any person that actually cared for me and reached out to me, I alienated and humiliated. And
wow,
it got to a point to where it wasn't so much the the bombing stuff anymore, or some of the unprocessed trauma that was coming up. I have made so many bad decisions. I've burned so many bridges and like I say, humiliated and alienated so many people that I didn't think there was any way back.
Yeah.
That's the point I got to. And my bottom of the barrel for me was and it was a slow build up, but once I got to the point to where I said, by this time I've been in the fire department 20, 25 years. I've made so many, first aid calls of, people mixing alcohol and prescription drugs and accidental overdoses. And well, that's how much I was worried about my self-ego, that when I finally thought, you know what, if I drink enough Crown Royal and take enough Xanax, there's a chance I don't wake up. But people will still say, well, bless his heart, it was an accidental overdose. Chris Fields would never,
Right.
not that it wasn't that he couldn't handle what was going on and he killed himself. It was just an accidental overdose. That's what a self-absorbed person I was. I was even concerned about what people would think about me, after that. So,
Right.
That's not uncommon. And you say a couple of really interesting things. You talk about feeling like there was no longer a way out,
mm-hmm.
and reaching a point where it was no longer, not even the bombing itself or the trauma that was coming along with the job, but on top of that, the weight, the piggyback weight of all of the decisions that you had made that had simply compounded your pain because of, well, it's just like you said, bad decisions. And you reach a point where you just don't know if there's a way back. And that's the moment when I think it's so profound, when you catch yourself in that moment and you look back and you say, well, what was it? What was it there and then that finally made a difference?
Right.
What was it that helped you turn around? Because that's a pretty dark place to be.
Right.
When you're devoid of any hope. And so what was it, Chris, that helped you?
I tell you what, for me, it was, I'll describe the scenario, but it was actually 2 words, and I'll tell you what they were after I describe. Once I, drank my alcohol and took my Xanax and wasn't really worried about things, I woke up about 2:00 in the morning and was in like a panic state, sweating, and I remember it vividly like it was yesterday. Like I could not find my family. I was looking for my family, and I was looking for my boys in their infant stage. And by this time, they're 17 and 11 by this time, but I'm looking for them as babies in my little 700 square foot apartment. And I remember laying in the living room floor, and I remember waking up this was about 2 a.m. So I remember going to the floor, and then I don't remember anything till about 5 or 5:30 that morning. And it was one of those surreal moments where I had to, when my eyes opened and the light was on above me in the living room, I thought, okay, am I alive, or is this what it's like? I had to kind of realize the moment, hey, I'm still alive. And when I did, man, I just had this overwhelming feeling. I thought, okay, Chris Fields, there is no way this is your purpose in life, and as we skip ahead, I know I get to speak to first responders and stuff like that now, but that was not what I was thinking when I tell people that I knew that wasn't my purpose. I thought, better. Number one, your purpose in life is to be an awesome person, an awesome husband and a father and a friend. And I knew I wasn't fulfilling any of those at that time. So I called my wife about 6 a.m, and I always get emotional talking about it. And but your question was, I had a guy ask me about 2 months ago. He said, at what point did you know that when you made the decision to try to get help or turn your life around, when did you know that you made the decision and it was going to be okay? And it's when I called my wife and said, I want to come home. And her response was, come home. And
wow.
right then I thought, okay, if this woman that I have humiliated and all this publicly, if she has the grace, if God's given her the grace, she has the grace to forgive me, then everything's gonna be okay, you know. And that's kind of
Right.
where the road to recovery started. It didn't. It had its bumps along the way, but that's when I thought, okay, if she's reaching out to help me, that's what was probably the most amazing thing was when I called her and reached out, and then the friends knew that I was going, and that things that the same people that I had pretty much written off of my life were right there for me, you know, reaching out to help me. The same ones I had turned down their help, you know, 15 months ago. So I think that was pretty overwhelming to see that these people, and my wife will tell you, she said, she'll tell people now, she said, I couldn't give up on him because I knew it wasn't Chris I was dealing with. She said, when I looked into his eye, when she looked in my eye, she said, it was just dark. It was just dark. And she said, so I knew that it wasn't Chris Fields I was dealing with. And that's when I took the steps, you know, to start getting help.
I was just thinking, you know, there's these roads, you know, that we're talking about. You know, the first road of how long did it take for you to go to counseling? How long did it take you to, accept help or to reach out and ask for help? So I'm thinking another road is, when do you take a turn and go, I want to help other people that are first responders, maybe not take such a long road as I did. So how did that come about for you?
Well, like I say, after all my therapy and EMDR therapy and dealing with unprocessed trauma, and got to where I needed to be the, you know, the person I needed to be, it was just kind of, it still wasn't on my radar screen to do this. It was kind of a guy that I had, one of the peer counselors I had become friends with, stayed in touch with when I went for the treatment facility I went to. He called and he said, hey, I got a friend who's going to be in Norman talking this deal. Why don't you go listen? It'd be good. Y'all should meet, yada, yada, yada. And so I went down there and listened, and he came up to me and we started talking, and we went to lunch, and I told him my story, and he said, you know, only you have this story. He said, and I think your story would help first responders. And he said, because he talked about, you know, a lot of mine ended up being cumulative trauma. And like you said, Kristin, the fact that it was, you know, so many years afterwards, you know, before I got the help and all that. And things just kind of, you know, one foot in the front of the other after that, things kind of, you know, turned into getting invited to come speak at some first responder events. So, and it was just and you know, and even it was kind of funny, and I'm not trying to be psycho weird here, but my wife, when I was going through my counseling and stuff, we went to a deal, and she stood up and spoke, and she told people right then, she goes, I don't know what it is. I just envision, I see Chris speaking to hundreds of people. And this was when I was still going through treatment. So,
and you were probably like, don't talk to me about that. You're crazy.
yeah. I was going to put her in treatment, you know, for that, but it's, you know, so after I met this guy and we talked, and things just kind of, one thing led to another. And, you know, now, like I say, it's, as dark as that day was, April 19th, 1995, it's turned out to be a blessing in my life, and it's given me a platform. And when I speak, I always show a few pictures and slides of the people, the victims, and because I like to pay honor and tribute to them, because if it wasn't for that day and them making the sacrifice they did, you know, I wouldn't have the platform I have to be out helping first responders.
It's always fascinating to me, the road that people end up coming to. And when you're you made the decision to do this even during a time when it really wasn't a popular decision to make. So that means you were a pioneer.
Oh, Lord.
And
That means I'm old.
I bet anything when you first started out thinking, oh, this is the career I want to have, if somebody would have told you that you would be doing this, you would have looked at them and said, what
Oh,
are
I
you
would.
talking about?
Absolutely. Absolutely. Matter of fact, I thought I was going to go back to, seriously, when I was going through therapy and meeting with my counselor in Stillwater, Kathy Thomas, and going through things. And I thought, okay, this is what I want to do. I want to do what she's doing. I want to help, she deals with first responder. I said, that's what I want to do. But then when I got to thinking about, you're 50 something years old, you really want to go back to school and, do all this kind of stuff. And then the
Yeah.
speaking deal kind of came up, and I thought, okay, this will be my way of doing it.
Mm.
What is the message, Chris, that there's so much to share with first responders? There's so much that they need to hear, and you know better than anybody what they go through and what they're experiencing. What's one of the messages that you always try to convey when you're speaking to that audience?
I always try to tell them, because a lot of people think, like I say, because of mine with the bombing, they think that's where they think that's why I was diagnosed with PTSD. I always try to let them know, it's not, doesn't have to be a headline grabbing major event. I tell them, everybody's trauma is different. What's traumatic to me is not traumatic to you. And that's kind of a new, I don't know what the word I'm looking for, on the fire department, to have to even think like that, to say, what's traumatic to me may not be traumatic to this person, or vice versa. So it's a whole new fire department world, first responder learning to, we still have our fun and jab and poke at each other, but to actually take somebody else's feelings or what they may have been through into consideration, that's a new thing for first responders, especially the fire department, I know. So that's why I just try to tell everybody is, that it doesn't have to be, and you've got to learn to communicate with somebody, whether your wife, a friend, a counselor, something, just to get it off your chest. Like I said, for me, it was a lot of cumulative trauma. Like I said, it was things that I had thought I had dealt with, because I dealt with them the way I was taught to on the fire department. Hug, cry just a little bit. I've lost, I think I lost five brothers in the line of duty in 31 years, in the fire department. I know that's probably small compared to some of these departments, but, and one of them was kind of my mentor, the reason I got on the fire department. And that was just a lot of, like I say, unprocessed trauma, because talking about it's not processing it, and knowing that those feelings that you have after a traumatic event are perfectly normal. Then you just have to learn how to deal with them and process them. And like I said, and for me, it was a lot of, like I said, cumulative trauma. It was that irrational guilt that I talked about, that I struggled with. One of the things that came out of my therapy was, and I think it played a huge role in the career I chose and the person I had become and who I am today, that opened up to my counselor about it. Nobody in my family, being molested when I was 10 years old. That was when I told that to my counselor, my therapist, it was like, that's the first time I'd ever said it publicly. And even though it was in a private office, but it's the first time it had come from my lips. And I felt like the weight of the world was lifted off my shoulders. It was a guilt that I carried around like I was responsible for it. And, and I don't know what the numbers are, but I know they say it's pretty huge for the number of people that experience childhood trauma that become first responders and become protectors. And
absolutely. Oh yeah.
So I don't know. I just try to encourage people to, it's a simple, it's okay not to be okay. Years ago that wasn't acceptable. No, it was not okay to not be okay. And now it is. And I always try to tell them, just because you got to talk about something doesn't mean you're going to be diagnosed with PTSD. It doesn't mean you're going to have to go to therapy. Everybody's different. So, if you feel like something's eating at you or gnawing at you, just take that 1 minute that it might take to talk to somebody about it, and it could change your whole course of life. I didn't.
Absolutely. And what you just told us at the very end is a whole separate podcast. That's something I dealt with as well as a kid, and yeah, that's part of what's made me have a whole network of podcasters talking about mental health. So it's kind of, these tragedies that happen at a young age can shape and mold you into doing really great things when you're an adult, as long as you process that pain.
Right. Like I said, and like I say, process the pain, and like I say, carrying around that, that guilt and a lot of stuff like that was the big thing for me.
I would imagine, Chris, that
Yes.
the story with you and your wife is a powerful one. And when you were sharing, I'm not sure if you use this phrase, but this phrase came to mind. Her loving you basically when you weren't lovable.
Mm-hmm.
That has to, as time has gone on, and now that you guys are where you are, affected the way you interact with other people.
Oh, no doubt. I have my view of the world was that, kid born in the 60s, born in 1964, raised in that suck it up era, that I had my, in that tough firefighter world. That was my, you know what? Yeah, you don't like it, suck it up. It's the way I feel. And if you don't, what I've been through, and to see my wife love me unconditionally, and it's changed my outlook on the human race, period. It really has. It's I don't know, I just more understanding and caring, and I actually listen to other people's points of view now. uh, it was it's changed me as a person, and that was a huge thing for me. Barry, was not, and it wasn't until about, even though me and my wife for the last 7-8 years, man, this has just been great. But it's all, when I go speak, it's all about Chris Field's story, and it's Chris Field's in the photo, and I was so caught up in that, even when I was out speaking and doing good, that I thought, I heard a lady speak about the effect on the family. And I really, like I said, even though we were doing great and I'd been through all this treatment and all these therapy sessions and life was great, man, when she started talking about how her and her kids were feeling while her husband was going through all his dark times, I had to get up, walk out. I had to call my wife and apologize, because I don't think I had ever, even though I was home and she had forgiven me and things, I don't think I probably had apologized for things I had done specifically, but I don't think I ever apologized at that time to my wife and my sons for the trauma I put them through. I could have very well had them end up being diagnosed with PTSD just for the things I was putting them through. And I had really never even stopped to consider that, even though when I'm telling my story, I sit there and tell you I knew how humiliated and all this, but to hear a family member that lived through it say how they were feeling at the time. And so now I've put myself in that position of thinking about how my wife, how she was acting strong for me, but inside she was probably destroyed, just like I was. I was acting strong for everybody on the fire department, and couldn't stand it on the inside. And I think that's probably exactly what she was going through.
All right, Chris, thank you so much for coming on the show and sharing just the very tip of the iceberg of your story. Where can listeners go to find out more about you and find out, about you coming and speaking with their organization?
Right. I have a website right now. It's www.chrisfields.org. I get a lot of people contact me on my Twitter handle is it's FF4OU. So a lot of people think that's for firefighter at 4OU, but the FS for Fields family. So it's FF4OU. And then I'm also involved with the vice president of nonprofit called Healthy Hire, Healthy Retire. And you can find we have a Facebook page and all that. And it's just an organization I'm involved with where we help first responders that need to get to treatment. We help them get there, whether it be airfare, out-of-pocket expenses on, insurance copays, or I think one time we paid a lady, we paid their rent for a couple of months, while the husband was gone to treatment. And so, all those avenues right there, I can be contacted on.
Wow, that's fantastic. Barry, I'm so grateful that you introduced me to Chris. I mean, this has been such a really incredible show, and we've done a lot of shows on this topic, and this one's going to definitely stand out for me.
Well, Chris, thank you. I can't thank you enough, and give that extraordinary wife of yours our best. And we appreciate the story that you've been willing to share here today. It's going to change lives. So thank you, brother.
Well, thank you, and thank both y'all for having me on. And tired of y'all, man. Keep doing what y'all doing. It's shows like this and other things. And like I say, it sounds cliche, but if it could save one life, it's well worth it. So just keep doing what you're doing.
Absolutely. And listeners, thank you so much for tuning in to another episode of our First Responder Mental Health Network on Mental Health News Radio.
Sometimes I'm passive aggressive, but never without good intentions. I heat up and act on my emotions.
Thanks so much for listening to Mental Health News Radio. Our podcast can be found on iTunes, Stitcher, and hundreds of other podcast apps, or you can visit our website at mentalhealthnewsradio.com. If you have a question or would like to be a guest, become a podcaster on our network, or join the amazing organizations that help keep us on the air, please email us at info@mhnrnetwork.com. Get ready for that special goodbye from our resident therapy dog, Miles, and a special thanks to Emily Sohn for letting us use her incredible song, Cordial, for our podcast music. Listen to the full song on SoundCloud at emily.sonne.
Don't be surprised when I don't hate on you. After all, we promised we'd be cordial. Sometimes in you I can fight it, but I'm opposing.
Good boy.